Hi, I'm Heather Groom, and this is High on Utah. Thanks for coming back. And today I've got a special guest with me. It's Levi Gillies, and he's with Silverline Sprinklers and Landscaping. He's my landscape person, and I just had a house, as a lot of you know, purchased a house about 2 years ago, and we did a big backyard plan. And so I had Levi come in and basically help me. I've had different landscapers over the years, but Levi's awesome. He's, I think, affordable. He's got great ideas and great experience. And I love the way that my yard turned out. And so a lot of you need to come and see my yard this summer because we're going to be swimming in it now. Well, not in the yard, but in the pool. So, but now I want you, and then you can come see all of my like trees and everything. But I'm really excited about how it turned out. So I thought it'd be great to have Levi on because I get a lot of questions about landscaping. People ask me, what not to do, what to do, what gives them value in their home. And a lot of people even wonder if there is value. So we're going to talk about a lot of those things. We're going to talk about some kind of like landscaping hacks and ideas. And so anyway, so welcome. So
Oh,
Levi,
thanks.
thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, so maybe first just kind of give a quick intro of who you are and how did you get into landscaping?
Well, of course, my name's Levi Gillis. Was originally going to go to school to be a dentist. Bunch of things came up and just kind of kept pushing me outside of that. So I decided to go for a career change and had a bunch of friends that one of them that worked for Ivory Homes and um, he knew a friend that needed somebody that was doing landscape and said, hey, he might need somebody for a couple weeks because I had another job lined up. So I started going to work with him, and within a week he came over, sat down with me and my wife, and just said, nope, you're coming to work for me. So
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
so I
Very
did that
interesting.
for 9 years, 10 years, and then about 5 years ago, branched off and decided to do our own thing.
And then you went in kind of on your own.
Yep.
That's great. That's true because I guess we met about 2 years ago, even.
Yes. Yep.
So, wow. Well, that's great. So then that's how you got in. So
Hmm.
you've got a lot of experience,
Yes.
and we were talking about earlier, just even off camera, about pressurized irrigation. So in Utah, we have pressurized irrigation, which is awesome because it's a flat fee per month with most cities. Some cities don't have it yet. In fact, I was even down in Hurricane yesterday,
Hmm.
and they are ripping up the streets and the city putting in pressurized irrigation, which that is so hard to do
Yes, it
and to
is.
come in after. But I think it is nice because then you've got water still. You're not having the bills. Like when I have clients that move here from California, for example, I had one of them and she told me, she said, oh yeah, like watering our lawn in the summer, she said was about $800. And
Wow.
I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. So, as much as pressurized irrigation, there's some things with that because we do get a little bit more weeds,
Yes.
right? Kind of maybe explain what even is pressurized
So
irrigation.
pressurized irrigation. So there's two types of water that people use. They use culinary to where it's tied into your drinking water. So we tap into your water line coming into your house. So you charge by gallon of usage. And because that water's treated, it typically costs a little bit more. Pressurized irrigation just ties into a local stream or reservoir, and then it just comes directly through. So you get a lot more dirt and debris, you get more weed seeds that blow in, so you typically will get more weeds on your grass without, treating it with some type of herbicide.
Right. So, what do you recommend? Do you recommend then people just kind of treat that because they do get more weeds, right, with the
Yes.
pressurized irrigation?
So if you go to any hardware store, around here you got IFA, you can go to Cow Ranch, or not Cow Ranch, but Home Depot. They have a 4 or 5 step process. Personally, I like to use the IFA stuff. So in February, March, April, you put down a fertilizer, which will green up your grass, but it has a pre-emergent as well. And what that does is it just prevents the seeds from germinating for the most part. And then
Wow.
those that get through, you hit your second step, which is April, May, and June, which will kill the existing weeds. And then you have a summarized fertilizer, and then you have a
And
winterizer.
then you kind of have
Mhm.
another one. Okay. And I need to be better about that. I
Yes.
am kind of like the worst on it. And then after I'm always like, oh, I need to get my lawn green. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, wait, we maybe should have done something. And then next thing we know, if we leave town, we have like weeds or,
Yeah. Mhm.
that kind of stuff. And we come back and we're like, Or a famous one, Brent will kill me for sharing this, but he has a real knack for killing off our yard. So he'll be like, "Oh, I just turned off the sprinklers." And I'm like, "What? Like we've been gone 10 days or
Yeah,
something or a week and and it's like July and it's like
it's
our
scorching hot.
I mean, the good news is grass usually does come back. That's what I tell
Yes,
people
it
because I
does.
even know this from selling homes. A lot of times, people are like, "Am I going to have to resod?" And I'm like, "It's amazing what water and fertilizer,
Yes, it does.
really does for you." So anyway, so I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of like common mistakes, and one of them that I'm gonna, talk about, kind of kick off is I once was in a home and we redid our landscaping 3 different times just because I don't think we really ever had a real plan. Like we just kind of threw in grass and then just kind of hoped for the best, I
Mhm.
guess. I don't know. And then later we were like, "Ooh, we should have done this or we should have done that." And so I'd love to chat about today a little bit of like common mistakes and get even really detailed on that as
Okay.
well. And so I'm going to turn it over to
Oh
you,
boy.
Levi. Tell me, what are some of the things that you see?
Well, I think the first one is not choosing me to do your landscaping.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, by the way. So I do think everyone needs to call Levi because really his pricing is awesome and he's got great ideas. So that is number one for
So I
sure.
think the biggest problem that most people have, and because budget runs everything, is everybody's on a budget. Same thing when you build a house, it just tailors all the way down to landscaping. So again, you don't want to pay too much for what you need, but the the big mistakes that people have is not doing the correct things in the right order. Like you said,
I
you like to
agree.
just,
Yeah,
you did it 3 times because you put in grass, and they're like, oh, well, now I need a basketball court, and now I
exactly.
need this. So get with a designer or a landscaper, and we can kind of help you know roughly what you should do. If you're going to be putting in a basketball or a pickleball court, let's just put that off and not put grass on it. Or if you are, we'll run the sprinkler lines in a way to where it's really easy to modify in the
And that's what
future.
you did for me, which was
Yes.
great because I wasn't sure if I would be able to do all of my yard at the same time. And so that was really helpful. And I think that's really key is that don't get overwhelmed by, the cost of it and doing everything all at once.
Mhm.
Because I think too often, especially right now, if people are, saving their cash to get into a new home or doing
Mhm.
things that, it's like they're like, okay, I've got this limited budget. And so but I think with that, like, I didn't have to pay for a really expensive plan. I worked with Levi directly, which was great. He came up with some ideas. We kind of
Yep.
just pounded it out, actually, the two of us,
Well, and that's the other thing is, I'm not a designer, so I'm not going to be able to tell you, draw something up and sketch it out for you. What Heather had is she had a designer already come up with a generalized plan,
Yeah.
and then we modified it quite a bit. Very rarely do I do exactly what the architect says.
That's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. Yeah,
So just
exactly.
because they have a completely different vision than necessarily what mine would be, or what yours would be. So I like to get with a family when they have a plan, and then we can talk about different ideas of how we can move things around, resituate it in the house or on the property. When it comes to trees and plants, is meeting like you
Yeah.
and Brent at the nursery and helping choose,
Yeah,
bloom
that was
times and
fun.
colors.
That was
Yes.
actually really fun because I've gone into nurseries before and I get overwhelmed because I am not like very good at any of this. Neither is Brent. Like Brent and I are complementary in a lot of ways, but I
But
can honestly
but
say
the thing
Brent does
the
not have a green
thing
thumb
that was
either.
great is we would walk
Yes,
around and you're like, "I like that," or "I don't like that." And so
exactly.
that gives me a better idea because I have a better understanding of bloom colors and heights, and so I know what's going to fit in with what your look
And
is.
that's what I liked is because I have kind of I wanted a
Mhm.
more modern landscape look. And one of the things we talked about was I just said, I don't want, and I'm gonna crush people's dreams here, okay? But I did not want a flowering pear tree, okay? And we've talked about this and we've laughed about it because in almost any house I sell, especially if it was from about 15, 20 years ago, we have flowering pears all over the place. Like Utah has this fascination with like flowering pear trees.
And over the next 2 weeks, everywhere
And
stinks.
then it's stinky, there's bugs, and yeah, they're kind of pretty, but yeah, there's some drawbacks too. But I joke around and I say it's a little bit like how Utah embraced the Tuscan villa look,
Mhm.
back in the early 2000s, they built these everybody was building a Tuscan villa, you know, and you can walk in. In fact, I just even showed some like this last weekend, but it was like, the heavy metal kind of light fixtures, the orange travertine tile floors. Like, as soon as I see a picture, I'm like, I know exactly when you built that house,
Yep.
And same thing with, I think, landscaping. I think there was this huge trend where everybody did these flowering pears, right?
Yes.
And just all over. And so now people are kind of going, maybe I shouldn't have planted that, or maybe I
Well,
need to do something different.
exactly, and they are a great tree in the fact that they're a very pretty spring
Yeah, they're pretty in the
white
spring.
blossom and then a beautiful dark red color in the fall. Um, the thing is that's different about these is when they blossom, they stink really bad. And the
Hmm.
general
Yeah,
reason
nobody told me that.
is because they use flies as pollinators and not bees. So
Oh, I
it's
didn't know
that
that.
where the way to kind of adapt. But the thing is after they've been in 15, 20 years, we're starting to see a huge problem with fire blight. And they're all dying and they're all looking really, really
And so
sad.
what is that exactly?
It's a disease. I'm not quite sure if it's a fungus, a
I
bacteria, or
have seen
something.
that and at some of the homes because those trees are dying
Yeah.
right now.
Yep.
And I actually just saw one. And I was thinking about that. Okay, I didn't know that. See, I learned stuff on my own
Yep.
podcast even.
So, and the reason as a landscaper, back, 15 years ago when I started, or 16, whatever it was, is it was a great park strip tree because they grow
Yes.
more of a columnar, and there's a few different varieties, but they grow anywhere. You can just put them in the ground and they grow. So, of course, as a landscaper, you don't want to plant something that's going to die.
Right.
So that was our default tree. Hey, we're going to plant a flowering pear. We're going to plant a flowering pear.
Yes. I had quite a few at my house I built about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yes, this is all resonating with me.
Yes.
But when I go to certain homes too,
Hmm.
I see it. And it's fine. I mean, it's a fine tree, but I think it's kind of overused. And what I see a lot of times in real estate is that people did the same yard a little
Hmm.
bit, like in different years, like
Yes.
it's not real unique. It's like I can pull up and I'm like, okay, it's funny you mentioned park strip because there are so many these
Hmm.
flowering pear trees in park strips. I pull up to the house and there they are. And so it's interesting because now people are pulling them out. I have
Yes.
noticed some of them are dying. And different things. And so one of the things I loved was just kind of going to the nursery, like
Hmm.
kind of going back to that and actually looking through things. I mean, because there's such a better variety. Like
There
we
is.
tend to kind of choose the same few things.
Yeah, and as a general rule, most landscapers have a default 3 or 4 trees. This is what I recommend: A, B, C, and D. Just because it's easy, you know what's going to grow. When I worked at our other company, because we did a lot of track homes, that's what we did. It was 3, 4 trees, 3, 4 shrubs, just a couple flowers, just because it was production homes. But now that we branched out and doing our own thing, we're able to do something that I enjoy. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way,
Yeah.
but I didn't have as big of a love for doing it as I do now. I like being able to come and sit down with the homeowners and really make people's dreams come true.
I
You
love
you
that.
told me when you guys were here, you guys just want to spend time in your backyard. You want to
Yes.
entertain. You want to feel like you're in your own little oasis,
Yep.
and that's what I like to create.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's important because, again, I think people think they have to spend all this money up front. But a lot of times it's just in phases. Like
Yeah.
you're better off to do and get what you want than have to redo it. Because the times I've had to redo my landscaping, which is more than one time on different homes, it actually cost me more,
Yes.
and created more of a mess as well.
Yes.
So kind of going back to kind of these hacks, and one thing I wanted to mention was that people ask me if they get that money's worth in their home. And what's interesting is my dad was an appraiser when I was growing up, and he said, it's the one thing people underestimate probably the most in their house is that they might get their house ready to sell, but they don't get their yard or
Mhm.
they don't make the landscaping look nice. And that does hurt the value. It also helps the value. And appraisers do give you credits on your appraisal for nice landscaping and things you've put in. And the reason I bring that up is because people are always asking me, well, where should I upgrade this or should I not? But definitely do the landscaping. And so I'd love kind of your thoughts on that as well.
I agree, but again, I'm biased because I'm a landscaper. So, when we've gone out and looked at houses, one of the first thing that me and my wife look at is we look outside and see what the yard is. Just because that's where we like to entertain. That in the summer afternoons and evenings, we want to be outside. So if it's run down and you don't have trees that are blocking the west side where the sun's coming in the afternoon, depending on which way your house faces. So I think it's important to put money into landscaping. And I've worked with quite a few different clients that are getting ready to sell their house, and that's what they want to do. We'll do a general yard cleanup, maybe plant a couple trees
Hmm.
strategically to block an unsightly view,
Or traffic
or
or your
traffic. Yep.
roads, things
And
like
that's the
that.
thing is now because we're getting all our houses are getting closer and closer together here in Utah. s- House screening and sound screening is becoming super, super
It's
important.
becoming more important all the time because I get excuse me, I get clients that oftentimes are moving. A lot of times maybe they're older, they're downsizing, and one of the things they said they hate is they go to these, a smaller downsized home, and then it's window to window
Yep.
basically. And so they're like, we have no privacy, and that's probably the hardest thing for them to give up, and I've even talked to different home builders and said, try staggering the lots even a little bit, or
I mean,
it's
even I mean,
hard.
your yard's is a perfect
Yeah,
example. I
that's
mean, you
true.
live in a nice neighborhood, but you do have houses that are fairly close.
Fairly close.
And
Yep.
that was one of the most important things for you two is not that we want to block out the neighbors, but you kind of want to block out the neighbors, so
Yes,
that you have your own privacy.
exactly.
And it's hard to do immediately. You got to kind of plant with a 3, 5, 6 year vision, knowing that each year you're going to get a little bit more privacy as it's going up.
Well, and I think that kind of goes to back to even some of the common mistakes.
Hmm.
Um, I see, and we've talked about this, but people don't put their trees in
No.
soon enough. Like they just don't put trees in. And maybe you can talk a little bit about
No,
that.
and again, it goes back down to budget. If I'm going to give numbers to something, they're comparing me against other landscapers, which I think is a smart thing to do, to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. But there's landscapers out there that cut costs and maybe not be insured or licensed to where they can cut their costs a lot. Whereas people doing it the
Hmm.
right way, which is the majority of us, are having to pay all of those extra
Right.
fees. So we are a little bit more expensive. Um, but going back to planting those trees, when you put in a yard, you want, of course, your sprinkler system and sod. That's just the basic. I always recommend if you can to get your trees in because it's going to be cheaper. We have our tractor access and you want those to start growing right away. If you're looking to cut costs, there's a couple things you can do. Hold off on your shrubs and your plants because they're a little bit smaller. They're not as important to plant right away.
I agree.
You can wait a year or
Yep.
two. Same thing if you want to put on, gravel or bark or some type of top dressing. Um, Curbing or metal edging can always be done later. It's usually a little bit more expensive, but not awfully more expensive, just because there's that additional fee of having to rip out the grass. But there are ways that we can cut that down
Hmm.
to where people can save a little bit of money. But trees and your grass, I think, are by far the most important thing to do.
Those are probably my biggest regrets
Yes.
in any home. When I've built several homes, and a few times we didn't get the trees in the first year, and later we've seen other neighbors' trees, and we're watching those, and they're ahead of ours, and we're like, trees grow, like we want them to grow faster. And, and meanwhile, other people then have shade or
Yep.
things like that. And so it's important. I think people think trees last, but just to your point, even digging and, planning for that can be done so much easier and faster when there's just nothing there than if you're having to go back and do it later. Then you're planting trees that are super
Yes.
scrawny too, that you're like, is that a tree or is that a bush?
Well, and it's true because usually, I mean, trees from a nursery for the general reason or come at a specific size. They kind of max out at a specific size. So that's what we try to plant. Like the ones that we planted here come in a roughly a 2.5 inch caliper tree. If you wait 2 years to plant more trees, it's hard for us to get that same size of root ball into most of these backyards where you don't have access because it doesn't fit in a wheelbarrow. They're hundreds and hundreds of pounds.
That
So
is so true.
that's why if you do it off the get-go, you can get a bigger tree and it's going to give all that time to really start to grow and get acclimated to the soil, to where you can start supplementing with, your fertilizers to really get it to start to grow.
Yeah.
If you wait, we usually have to go with a container tree, which is smaller. They don't grow as fast, and it's just going to take longer to get the privacy that you're
And that's a
wanting.
really good point because even though I have a half acre, I have because my house is longer, kind of my setbacks on my sides of my house are difficult.
Mhm.
So we had to really get those trees in early because to your point, otherwise we would be hand carrying
Yeah.
everything. So we were able to get bigger trees in kind of sooner, which was also really nice. But yeah, I think that that's really good. So kind of going back to other mistakes, kind of what else do people forget to do, or what
Well,
do you see?
well, then even going back to the trees, it's just planting the wrong kind of things in your yard. I mean, we're here in Utah. We're in a dry climate. There's a lot of trees that are more native, that a lot of people don't. They overlook because they think, oh, I need a flowering pear, or
Right.
whatever everybody else has. But I think one of the other mistakes is not planting something that's going to work where you live. Out in Saratoga, the soil is a lot different than it is over in Pleasant Grove or in Provo. So knowing and visiting your, a landscaper or your local nursery to see what specific trees are going to grow in that area, and or shrubs and flowers. Here, there's kind of a big push within a lot of the garden groups is to try to go a little bit more water wise, of course, to save our water. Some of
Yeah.
the native trees that grow really good here, you've got like your big tooth maple, you've got your junipers. A couple others are like some columnar oaks or columnar birch that a lot of people overlook. The only thing is, because they are native, they're not always the most attractive trees. You've got some nice trees here. One of which, the Canadian red chokecherries
Yeah,
that
I
you
love
love.
those.
So
Those better never go out of style because I am like all in on those.
I love them. They grow really good, and I was speaking with one of my nurseries and about this, and they just say, yeah, there's a handful of trees that are just default, and they'll grow anywhere in Utah. The Canadian red chokecherry is one of those. Um, the other would be a crab apple, pretty much any crab apple, and a lot of people have holdups on that because of the fruit. The thing
Yes.
is crab apples are very, very good for nature because it gives our birds something to eat in the wintertime when there's nothing else to eat.
Mm.
So most crab apples, they will have fruit depending on the size. It's very, very small to a little bit larger. But they hold on to that fruit after all the leaves fall. For the most part, you'll have a
I was
little bit
gonna
that
say,
fall.
I don't see a lot of
And
the
then
fruit really
and then the birds,
falling.
yeah. So I replaced a couple of my part strip trees 2 years ago because the ones I got just happened to. I didn't get a good graft of it. It was a
Okay.
not
I was gonna
flowering
say
pear,
flowering pear. Let me
flowering
guess.
cherry.
Yeah.
No, I don't like it. But the trunk, the graft that they're on, it didn't work. So I ripped them out and replaced them with some prairie fire crab apple, and they just have these little teeny berries, and they're just falling off
Huh.
now. But the birds have been flocking it at my house and eating it, and I love it. Our kids open the
Oh,
windows,
that's
and you
fun.
can kind of see them out there. So
Yeah, and it's not like some of the trees when we say that, like the birds coming, it's not like, so massive like some of the fruit trees,
no,
where you get, you know,
just
so much and then
a
it's just
mat of, yeah,
nasty and
no,
gross. Yeah. No, but I've seen the crabtree ones and it's very minor,
yes, depending on the variety, there are some that get a
Yes.
little bit bigger,
I was
but
gonna say I've
yes,
seen some that are kind of a little bit bigger
but
and
yeah.
then the small
For
kind
the
of
most part, they're about the
berry.
size, yeah, about a cherry or smaller.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they're like pretty small. So those are really interesting. And one of the things that you kind of touched on this already is just people are being more water wise, is
Mhm.
what I call it. I think we all know that we live in a desert. Maybe we figured that out now,
Yes,
right?
I
And
hope so.
so we live in a desert. Water is precious.
Mhm.
And we need to just be careful, I think, with it. But people are trying to choose things that I would say for two reasons, for the water. And then also, I would say just kind of the ease. They don't want to be out mowing the lawn,
Mhm.
all summer long, and just all of this grass. And this is a mistake that I've made. I think when I had younger kids, you think, oh, I'm just going to put in all
Grass,
this
grass,
grass,
grass.
grass, grass, grass. And everybody puts in all this grass. And guess what? Nobody like Brentwood used to travel for work.
Mhm.
So then couldn't even mow it half the time.
Well, it
And
takes
then my
so much
kids,
water.
and it takes so much water. And my kids really didn't, I mean, yes, they play on grass and it's great. You need some, but they didn't need the entire backyard,
A whole football field worth,
like
yeah.
a whole ton of it. Yes, exactly. So I'm really liking what we did here in my
Mhm.
current house because it gives off this kind of, there's still green and grass and a green vibe, but we actually don't have that much grass
No,
here.
and you don't. And one thing that we did really want to do with yours, and that's I guess another mistake that people do, is a lot of people they just go to the nursery and they buy everything that's there right now that's flowering. Well, two things. If you buy only flowers, all you have is color, and you're only going to have it for a short time because there's different flowering times throughout the year.
And at the same time.
And at the same time, yeah. So you don't want your yard to be beautiful for 1 month of the year and then just for the rest.
Yes.
So
So
that's
such a good point because we have amazing, like I think in my last house, um, I did some actually good things. I mean, not always, not always did I make good choices in landscaping, but I did love the way it looked in the fall. And what people don't realize is that in Utah, we have like a spring market. I mean, really anymore, like, I mean, I sell homes all year round. I mean, I sold some in December. December was a wild, crazy month for me this last year.
Mhm.
But I sell a lot in the fall. And what's interesting is when I go to show a home in the fall, a lot of times the yard is completely
Dead.
dead.
Mhm.
And and then if you look down the road, there'll be another house and they're like, "Why does that house have like pretty bushes?" And
Yep.
because I know, I see, and I don't know the name of anything, so I just can describe. But I know I used to have this like bush that like turned, it had like red leaves in the fall.
Yeah.
You probably
Burning
know.
bush.
Yes,
Yes.
burning bush. So, but it would be kind of green and then kind of go to red, and they looked really nice.
Mhm.
And so that was something that we also considered when we were, talking, when we were meeting. As I said, I want to make sure that we have things that look good in the spring, things that look good in the summer, and then things that look good in the fall.
Yes.
And nothing looks good in the winter, but
No, not
that's a
here.
sad reality.
Yes. No, and that's the thing is not just mixing colors, but also mixing
Yeah,
textures
I love that.
to where we've got a lot of like deep rich green and we've got light wispy like willow type stuff. So we've got a lot of good mixture in your house while still keeping with that modern look that you wanted.
Yeah, I love that because that's true. We do have like different grasses and even different colors of green. So I like, personally, I like the color. But even the textures I think is really
Mhm.
important as well. And just the variety. And I've had people come over and they've looked and they're like, "Wow, your landscaping is really different than,
Mhm.
others around." And I love it. Like, and we did like an area, maybe I'll throw some slides on or something if I can remember, but like we even did like some bigger rock,
Mhm.
around like my front kind of step area. It's easy maintenance. And I think again, what people are also looking for, especially after they've made the mistake of the all grass backyard,
Yeah.
you know, is I think what they do is they also are looking at maintenance. Like
Mhm.
people just don't have the time anymore, to come in. They're like, I don't have time to weed and take care of this. And recently I sold a doctor's house, and they were saying they had to spend hours a week,
Yeah.
in the yard, and they were hiring it out because he just said, I can't even, I can't even keep up with it anymore.
It's hard, and that's the thing is, I mean, if you don't have just an all grass backyard and you do add some planter beds, flower beds around the perimeter or stuff, there's ways to really cut down on your weeds. One, you can always add a landscape fabric if you want. But one of the best ways is to plant ground cover, that basically will just kind of meander through and fill up any of that area because most ground covers are going to choke out your weeds. You'll get a few, and then after 2 to 3 years, you don't have very many weeds at all, and your flower beds are completely full with this
So
beautiful
true.
ground cover growth, and then you've got your accent flowers and your shrubs and then your trees as a backdrop.
Yeah. No,
So,
that's such a good point because I think the ground cover, I think we don't do that enough,
mhm,
especially like with rock walls. A
yes.
lot of people, they have the rock walls. I call it the Utah rock wall with like the big boulders.
Yep.
But then a lot of times that dirt also starts to, slide, it
Mhm.
moves, and I've even seen people get, kind of dinged with an inspector before because it's eroded too much.
Mhm.
And so it's nice if you put kind of some of that ground
Yeah.
cover in there. It just kind of keeps that so it's not blowing around, like the dirt's not blowing
There's
around. And
great ground covers that are just native here that just they'll fill that whole area up and the roots hold on to that stuff so you don't have any of that sloughing off of any of that
and it's
soil.
cheap. It is
Yes.
so cheap. Like I think I was shocked even when I went. I was like, "Wait, how much is this
Yeah.
for all of this ground cover?"
Yep.
You just kind of plant it around.
Mhm.
But I think that that's actually one of the more underutilized things.
Yes.
I agree with you 100% on that because in my backyards where I've done that, it makes a difference.
Mhm.
Also, it just kind of I don't know if I can say it cools it off, but it seems like it.
It does because it's reflecting or the ground cover is absorbing that instead of going down onto the hard surface like gravel or dirt and absorbing all of that sun rays. There
Yeah,
you
basically
go.
just like all the yeah, and just the heat,
Yeah. Mhm.
because there's so much heat. But and I think everyone, again, thinks that it's going to be more weeding, which is ironic because actually I have really not had to weed a lot right now.
No.
But there have been other yards I've had where I'm always like, in fact,
Yeah.
I think when we met, I was like,
I
I
don't want
do
to
not
weed.
want a lot of beds,
Well,
a
we
lot of flower beds, you
we
know.
did put a few in, but
We actually put
yeah.
quite a few in, but because of the way we did it,
Yeah,
it
you sh
it turned out different,
yes, it will.
than my other ones where I'm like, okay, it used to be when my kids were younger, I'd be like, okay, Saturdays,
Yep,
everybody go get a Home Depot bucket in the
and
garage or
fill it up, yep.
whatever. And I was see, everybody's learning about my parenting here too, but I would be like, go pick. I think we used to say go pick 25 weeds or something. Like they each had to go pick 25 weeds on like a Saturday morning and throw them in a Home Depot bucket.
That's cool.
Isn't that just funny? I mean, maybe it's a good thing. I don't know.
Hard work.
But again, kind of going back to the water conservation and I think also I mean we've made some cool advancements lately. Like, you can do your sprinklers from your phone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so cool. Like back in my like early first days, like we couldn't do that.
No, and that's there are some really cool apps out there, phone. We use the Ratio on a lot of our,
Yeah.
higher end homes, or well, not higher end, but just anybody that wants to be tech driven. Those are nice because it updates to the local, what's the word I'm looking for? Weather center that's closest to your house, and it'll update, I think, either once a day or multiple times a day. So if you have wind coming in and it knows it's going to be pointless to do it, it'll hold
Yeah.
that off and then water. It changes the time frame depending on when it thinks is most efficient. And you can of course set parameters if your city or local area has water restrictions and you can only water certain days or whatever. It takes all that into account. Sometimes it'll only water for 5 minutes, sometimes it'll water for 20, depending on how deep your roots need to be. And it's pretty high tech.
That is really cool. I mean, I love that, and especially like when we start hitting kind of monsoon season
Mhm.
and we start getting rain in the evenings,
Then we don't need as
then
much.
you don't
Mhm.
have to use as much water. In fact, I kind of laughed. I forgot to even mention. I even wore my sweater today because this is like landscaping, so I was like, this has like flowers on it. I don't know if you can see it, but I was like, okay. But I'm glad that Levi's come today. So I'm trying to think kind of as we wrap up, what other things would you share with other people? Like as far as like ideas or thoughts?
Ideas if you're kind of doing it like a do it yourself, if you're going to be planting stuff in your flower beds, don't just go and say, okay, I've got $500. I'm going to go buy all the trees and shrubs in April or May. Spread it up into 3 different times of the year so that you have the bloom because your local nurseries are gonna carry what's blossoming and what's pretty at that time. So if you can go in May or June and buy, let's say you got a $600 budget, spend $200 or
I love that.
$300
I'd
in the
never thought
spring,
of that.
and then
Yeah.
split the rest between summer and then fall. Because right now in spring, it's what are we, the 1st of April, you're going to go out and you're going to see, especially around your rock walls, you
Yes.
have these beautiful flowers that are just, it's a ground cover and it's just gorgeous purple and pinks. It's called creeping phlox. It's
Hmm.
gorgeous. until it's not. As soon as it's done blossoming, it's a very
Is that the one that
unattractive.
kind of dies
Yeah,
almost? It
and
looks
it's
kind
kind
of
of
dead.
prickly. Yeah.
Yes, and I
So,
know which one you're
but
talking
it's
about.
so pretty, and a lot of people will go out
Yes,
right now. Look, oh, look at all that, and they'll plant that all over in their yard. So it's amazing
in
for
the
about
spring,
3 weeks,
right?
and then for the rest of the year, it's just eh. So
Oh, yeah, good
go and get
point.
stuff that's going to be blossoming at different times. Same thing that you said, like in the one that you sold in the fall. There's some that looks very similar to that. It's called an aster. That's beautiful in the fall time, but all spring and summer it's just doesn't look very pretty. So if
Mhm.
you can change that up, that's be one of
Would you, like, recommend even putting a little bit of both in
yeah,
then? So
yeah.
then kind of
So,
maybe
yeah, so if you've
mixing it
yeah,
up?
so yeah, plant some strategically throughout your yard so that you've got it, color in the spring,
Okay.
and then as that dies down, then you buy your summer color that's gonna blossom up, your daylilies and different things that are gonna have color throughout the summer till about September, October when it starts to die, and then if you can have a couple, there's not a whole lot in the fall, but there are a few, like asters are the one that comes to mind, but
Mhm.
just plant 3, 4, maybe 5 of those so that you have a little bit of color, or mums. Mums are great for the fall time.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
Actually, I did have some of those in the yard that I
yeah.
I liked. I think I had mums, burning bush in the fall, and then I had some spring
Yeah,
stuff too,
and then
you know?
again, when you're planting, mixing them up. As a general rule, groups of odd groups are better than even. So if you're going to plant something, I like to do them in groups of 3 or 5, depending on what our spacing is. Mix them up. If you're going for the modern look, straight lines. If not, just kind of moving it more in like a triangle pattern, just to kind of fill in those little areas.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because again, I see a lot of landscaping
Mhm.
because going and showing homes, um, it's interesting, but I can always tell kind of a home job. No offense to anybody
Mhm.
watching, but usually, when I go out there, I'm like, I mean, sometimes it's not even close, but sometimes it's like, I can just tell that maybe they went just like you
Mhm.
said. Maybe they said, okay, I only have $1,500 for plants. And then they went and did it all at once. And so I love what you just said about breaking it up in time because
Mhm.
actually that's a much better idea because then you're getting that variety in different times of the year. And buying maybe $200 worth of things and then kind of doing that in the different seasons because then you're going to get different things. I love that because I think it's just really important. And again, people can tell
Mhm.
when they come over, usually, or if you go, like I said, I go to show a home and, I can tell. And a lot of times there are no trees. Like I remember
Yeah.
one time, like we sent feedback and we were like, there was not one tree in the backyard or front yard. And so it was just kind of like there was just something missing and people kept going, I don't know what it is about this house, but there's something that's just not right. And it was really the
It's
trees.
it's crazy what trees do to a house just to make it
Yes.
feel more homey in the backyard. Just
Yeah.
having something as an accent there or putting or producing shade really means a lot to a
It
lot of
really
people.
does, and people they sometimes can't tell
Mm,
what it is, but again, you do usually get that as credit on your appraisal. So, like, an appraisal will come out and look at it and know that you've spent time and consideration on your landscaping, and you'll get a credit. So, it's one of those things that I remember my dad telling me that, years ago because, like I mentioned, he was an appraiser, and he said, "People just cut too much from that."
yep.
And he said, they might paint inside, but then there's nothing in the yard,
Mhm.
And so he's like, I can't give them any kind of real value there, And so other people are going to have to come in and fix it. So, okay, well, what are the last few things? Is there anything else that we didn't cover?
I don't think so. I think we went over
I love
everything
that
that we
Levi
talked
brought
before.
notes and he's like so prepared and
I was
he's
scared.
yeah. Levi's great.
Honestly.
I always love having some of my favorite contractors on because they're really great. Not a professional actor, by day, right? But
Yeah.
but neither am I, right? So, but I just say that's what I love though, is Levi really knows landscaping. And again, I feel like you were able to organize my thoughts on what to do and kind of stage it out. Because at the time, actually, um, when I think we met,
Mhm.
like Brent wasn't, he didn't have a job yet. He had been laid off. And so we were kind of in this in between. So I was like, okay, here's what I can do. And you were really good at organizing us and giving us a good plan. And so I really appreciated that. So if you'd like to get a hold of Levi, so Levi, maybe just, tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Well, yeah, you can call me 801-473-5337. And I think that's one thing that does set me apart from other people is I try to always answer my phone. If I'm on the other line, I always return a phone call. That's one feedback that I've gotten from multiple clients is even years down the road after I've done the project, if they have a question or a concern or an issue, they call and I'll always answer and say, yeah, I'll be right there.
Yeah,
But
and that's true because I've called Levi many times, so I can tell you he definitely does answer his phone. So okay, so give you a call. Do you have like a website or are you on
we've got
social or anything?
Facebook.
Okay,
My wife has made something. I'm not too techie that
I'm not
way.
very techie
So
either.
I,
So
I can get that for you.
no, that's great. So maybe just reiterate your so it's Silverline
Yep.
Sprinkler.
Silverline, one word, sprinklers and landscapes.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for coming on today. I
Thanks
really
for having me.
appreciate your time and thank you for tuning in to High on Utah. We'll see you next time.
Yep.
Thanks.